What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, November 18th, 2016. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Heading on into Thanksgiving week. And a reminder that our much overworked and underpaid RBN control staff are being given Thanksgiving Day and next Friday off. So we're only going to have 3 days of live radio next week. 4-day weekend, we can all relax and then back at it the following Monday. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 today with her unique perspective on the world. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room today. He's taking over from Mike and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. So let's get right on in here to the political news because there is a lot going on right now. A lot of rumors flying. We're still not really getting a lot of hard information. Everybody's trying to plant rumors and make things happen just by a claim in the media. A lot of focus still on Steve Bannon, who is being soundly attacked by everybody in the corporate media because he comes from the independent media. And it signals a major shift in that the White House is not just going to automatically presume that the network news is the real news and everybody else is a fake, which has been the policy up until now. And so he's under attack. He's being called a racist because he supports nationalism. And Steve Bannon is coming on out and says, no, you're misconstruing. I'm not a white nationalist. I'm a nationalist. I'm an economic nationalist. Now, of course, to the globalists, the New World Order people, nationalism is as bad as racism. How dare you want to have your own nation and not be part of the greater global good? And so there's a lot of that nonsense going on. But a lot of people are saying that Wall Street ought to be very worried about Steve Bannon because even though Steve Bannon came out of Goldman Sachs, he apparently gave a speech to the Christian Conservative Human Dignity Institute back in 2014, before he even knew he was going to be involved with the Trump campaign. And he was talking about the causes and after effects of the 2008 financial crisis. And Bannon came on out and said the fault for all of this was the greed of the Wall Street bankers, and how angry that he, Steve Bannon, was that none of these crooked bank executives ever faced criminal prosecution. So that's a reason for the money junkies to be quaking in their boots along with their corporate media brethren. The times they are a-changing. And those that can adapt and adjust will do okay, and those that cannot will rapidly fall to side. Okay, the Tantrum Squad is up here attacking my server right on time. It does concern me that this far after the election, they're still trying to play these games, and I don't understand why. Is the tantrum really lasting that long, or is it simply that they really think they're going to be able to steal the White House with the Electoral College? Right now, my perception is that the protests are beginning to fade. They're now back to being small gatherings on college campuses, and there's not a lot of impetus behind them. And more people are saying that this idea that Hillary can persuade so many members of the Electoral College to flip against the will of their state's voters, it's a long shot. It's a Hail Mary pass. So right now, of course, I think the maximum point of risk, and a lot of people are talking about this, is that were Donald Trump to be assassinated before December 19th, then the Electoral College could hand the White House to Hillary Clinton without too much complaint. Now, Japan's Prime Minister Abe has met Donald Trump, says he's confident he can build trust. Certainly that's got to be a refreshing change over the last few administrations that proved to be eminently untrustworthy. And remember, that was a big part of Donald Trump's appeal to ordinary Americans. Donald Trump is a businessman. He understands if you get a reputation for not keeping your promises, you are not in business for very much longer. There has to be counterparty trust. This is in stark contrast to the world of career politics, where people lie about what they're doing from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. In fact, they lie so much they don't dare tell the truth even once out of fear we might actually learn how to tell the difference. And that's a very, very refreshing situation. Now, little memo here. This is coming out of Veterans News Now. Memo to Hillary supporters, Trump won. Stop whining, grow up. Everybody's getting sick of the snowflakes and the buttercups and the crybabies and the sore losers, and that is, in fact, the public image you are showing to the world right now. I can understand. Yesterday we were talking about how these anti-Trump protesters are now threatening reporters not to make video of them because it does look bad. They want the corporate media to be able to say, oh, it was a relaxed and orderly expression of democracy and First Amendment rights. No, it's thuggism. It's broken windows. It's burned cars. It's people being attacked. And it's not presenting a very positive image to the world. Now, we're going to take a couple of seconds here and do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But this image that these anti-Trump protesters are putting on out is basically being perceived around the world as a bunch of whiners, crybabies, sore losers. They want to change the rules after it's all over so that they can be awarded their participation trophy. That one video out of New York of an anti-Trump protester screaming that all Trump supporters ought to be put in concentration camps and exterminated, that does not convey a sympathetic public image. And not too surprisingly, polls are now showing that 62% of voters, after this election, they're feeling less proud of America. They're not feeling good about their country and its democratic processes. All right, let's take a phone call. James in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? James, are you there?
You know, say it again?
Okay, I can hear you now. What's on your mind?
Well, I'd like to run this by you, see what you think. We all know that all manner of pressure is being applied to the electors at this time in preparation for the 19th, right?
Yes.
And Soros and the rest of the deep state, you know, given their history, the MO they'll likely imply is all kinds of bribing and threats and everything else. And I would suggest this. A lot of us think that this should prompt a civil war, but that would play right into the globalist agenda. You know, this dynamic that we're having now with free speech and independent media, they can't get their tentacles around. Mm-hmm. But they would love for it to turn into a civil unrest kind of dynamic on our part because they have provisions for that eventuality that would probably blow both of our minds.
Okay, well, let me back up here a little bit because I take exception with a couple of things that you said. First of all, nobody's out here encouraging or wanting a civil war. We would like to avoid one. Okay, but if they try, if the Electoral College hands the White House to Hillary Clinton, nobody in this country is going to believe that it was lawful, fair, or just. They're going to understand the electors were being given death threats to hand her the dictatorship, or they were bribed by George Soros. Nobody's going to buy that. Now, our government, to be very honest, is overextended militarily. You have to look at how well they're dealing with civil uprisings in Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Iraq to understand they're not as good at controlling the urban environment as they would like to believe. Now, the police are really good at containing the staged and organized riots and protests like Black Lives Matter and all the rest of that. But 200 million Americans standing up all at the same time and marching on Washington, D.C., they couldn't handle that any more than they're able to handle the Taliban.
Well, I think that independent media needs to get in front of this thing and preempt it and let them know that there's more than one coup going on. There's people on the inside of our government that are prepared to release all of the information that they're holding on to.
Well, when they actually do it, I'll report it. But I'm really kind of sick and tired of all these people saying, there's somebody over here who's going to release this. Oh, they're going to release it over here. And too often it doesn't happen. So I don't invest any more time in somebody saying there's a release about to happen. Don't bother me with that. When you release it, then it's newsworthy, and then we will cover it.
Well, if they do shenanigans on the 19th, I think they're going to learn that theirs is not the only coup getting ready to take place in our country.
Well, there's a lot of anger in this country, and the fact that Hillary's people are still out there acting like spoiled brats and brown shirt thugs, the fact that Obama and Sanders and Hillary are not trying to calm the situation down. In fact, over in Germany, Obama's actually fanning it up. You know, he's out there saying, yeah, go cause damage, beat protesters, rule by thuggism. And that's how scared they are of Donald Trump here. But again, what I said before, a Soros-style color revolution only works if the whole population is brainwashed into believing that those causing the violence are somehow on their side, and they don't have that here. Everybody looking at these anti-Trump protests are seeing them as a bunch of crybaby sore losers. And they're not sympathetic, and nobody's going to be on their side.
And yes, I'm agreeing with you. We don't want it to be that kind of civil unrest dynamic. It's a war, it's a revolution, but it's a revolution of information.
It's a peaceful revolution. It's a peaceful revolution, just like John F. Kennedy said we should have. James, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here and switch over to Dan in California. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How are you there, Mr. Rivero?
Hanging in.
Well, I listen to your program. I've listened to your program off and on quite a bit. I tried to send you an email on central banking. I don't know if I did it right, so you may not have it.
You may need to resend it. We had a little bit of a glitch. The company that handles email for What Really Happened had some kind of a problem, and I lost a bunch of emails from last night.
I did it under the other one, the live show thing where you have it. I didn't do under What Really Happened. I did it under the other one, the ERT or
HB Entertain. Yeah, okay.
WRHRT. That's the one I did it under. So
right.
I don't know if I did it right. I'll do it again. I'll have to figure it out.
I don't think that's a valid email address. There's no WRH at HB Entertain.
Okay. Well, it says if you want to send it, hit this and do this and comment, and then I don't have a website, so I just did it through Facebook, and I don't know if it went through.
Okay. Anyway, we're kind of grinding through the time. What do you want to talk about? What's on your mind?
Here's the thing. For quite a while, I've stated to several people that there were 4 places on Earth that have successfully dealt with central banks. 1 is the state of North Dakota. Mm-hmm. 2 is Iceland. 3 is Hungary. And 4 is Russia. Are you familiar with those and how they did it? What they did?
Yeah, I'm familiar with what they did here. North Dakota has a state central bank for the state itself, right, providing interest-free loans for development, but they're still underneath the Federal Reserve System.
Right.
Iceland basically decided they didn't want to be part of the EU and the ECB. Russia still has a central bank, and it's still privately owned, but Putin took control of it to manage Russia's public currency as a public utility, and that was exactly the moment when Russia went from partner and ally in the New World Order to being the top of our special high-interest targets list. It was all about that, not letting the private central bankers plunder the people. That makes you the enemy of the United States government.
Correct. Hungary, you familiar with Hungary?
Kicked out the Rothschilds. Yep.
Huh? Kicked them out, yeah. I think they paid a price like Nicholas Biddle tried to do with Andrew Jackson with a downturn in the economy, but all Jackson did was just throw the money into the other banks that weren't controlled by the U.S. bank at the time, the equivalent of the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
Orban, I think, just threw the central bankers out, and I think they had quite a downturn, but then they recovered finally. But they were lauded by several newspapers in Europe for kicking the Rothschilds out, and amazingly, our Federal Reserve is Rothschild controlled. They were lauded because we were in there with our Federal Reserve screwing around with the high leverage that the central bank.
Well,
the high leverage.
Okay, hang on. First of all, we've covered a lot of this already in my online article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. And I would certainly like to see the Federal Reserve shut down. But we've seen, again, go through that article, all wars are bankers' wars throughout history. These private central bankers have a lock on the human race. We are all their property and their slaves, and anytime any head of a nation tries and break free, war and assassination results. And we know that one of the reasons for Kennedy's assassination, there were many of them, but one of the reasons was his signing of the executive order to issue a new currency for the American people that wasn't borrowed at interest from the Federal Reserve. And, of course, as soon as Kennedy was killed, those U.S. notes were pulled from circulation to turn us all back into debt slaves to the Federal Reserve. And what's his name? McCloy got put on the Warren Commission, and he was a banker. He wasn't an investigator. He wasn't a homicide investigator. He was there to keep the lid on.
You know what happened to the $4 billion that were printed and authorized, but only $400 million went into circulation, and usually $5 denominations? You know where they sit right now? And it came out with when Reagan put the gold commission out there to go to the vault in whatchamacallit, Fort Knox. They're sitting on pallets in Fort Knox, and some of the people asked the head of the Fort Knox, well, what are all these paper U.S. notes doing here? And the comment was, well, that is what meets the requirement that these have to circulate on par with Federal Reserve notes. This meets the circulation requirement, having them there on pallets in the vault. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I can believe that. I actually thought most of them were destroyed because the ones that are still out here are considered collectible items. Dan, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to switch to Bob in Nevada. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I know we're a week away, but I wanted to wish you and Claire a happy Thanksgiving, and I want you to enjoy your 4-day weekend.
I certainly plan to.
Okay.
I'm actually going to be restringing Claire's harp. You whoop-de-doo, you know.
Enjoy. Lucky you. I'm getting tired of this Obama self-congratulatory tour. And you know, it's funny. He keeps talking about his own popularity polls. How do we know, in light of what happened during the election with all these polls that were overpolling Democrats, women, minorities, illegals, how do we know this Gallup poll is accurate?
We don't.
His poll ratings at 57%.
We don't. I mean, the fact that they're at 57%, I absolutely don't believe that. You know, what it is they found 5 people who really like Obama, and they call them like 100 times each. Yes, I already told you I love him. All right, we got 5,000 people who say I love him. Yeah, of course all these polls are being rigged. And we shouldn't believe anything that's in them that benefits or favors politicians or corporations.
Absolutely not. You know, Mike, this Electoral College, you were talking about it yesterday. They meet December 19th, and they've been threatened. I'm a little worried because Trump, and maybe it's better that he not touch on this subject, term limitations. Now, that's anathema to all politicians, career politicians, Republican, Democrat alike. Now, if it does go to the House, then what do these Republicans have to lose in voting against Trump?
Well,
he's got it out for them anyway.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. The fact that the fact that it has to go through Congress, Trump's not going to get it there. Term limits is something that is going to have to be forced on the Congress by we, the American people, and make it an issue 2 years from now to Congress. Okay, if you are not in favor of term limits, you do not get my vote. You know, what we just succeeded in doing is sending a warning message to every elected official in the United States: don't bet the future of your job on those crooked elections. Because we, the people, when we move as a single American people, we can overcome it all. And, of course, over the next 2 years, we're going to be lobbying intensely for some serious election system reform. And we're going to have the White House on our side because we have an administration that wasn't the beneficiary of the election fraud, and they're going to be very supportive of cleaning up this act so that Trump can get a second term.
Right.
Okay.
Right. You know, Mike, can you just hold me over? I just have one thing to...
I'm going to hold you over, and then we'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to Bob in Nevada, and then we're going to close the phone line so I can get some news out. Bob, you have one more thing you wanted to add.
Yeah, Mike, two issues that aren't related to what we're talking about. I'd love to hear you talk about it either today or in the future. Is the super volcano beneath Yellowstone National Park
Mm-hmm.
and hypersound technology. Putin discussed it with his generals and defense industry chief officials. Hypersound technology for military purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know if you could explain that. That's all. Thank you so much, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Bob. We're going to let you go and close the phone lines. We've talked about the supervolcano under Yellowstone on numerous occasions. Certainly every time there's a quake swarm over there, we mention it with the idea that should something happen, that people in a very large area need to be prepared to deal with that. As far as the hypersonic weapons, basically it's sort of a continuation of like the LRAD, but they're getting into an area of being able to produce continuous shock waves at a given frequency, which can be very, very destructive. Just a single shock wave from supersonic aircraft can break windows. Having a continuous tone of actual shock waves can pretty much pound a lot of stuff into rubble very, very quickly. Now then, getting on back to some news. One more of the claims made in the corporate media has been exposed as fake news, and we're going to be hitting this thing really hard. And you all have to be. Every time the corporate media is caught in a lie, go back into history, dig out all the lies, flood everything, social media, your websites, blogs, comments with it, because of this ongoing war by the corporate media and various dictatorships to try and say, they're the truth and we are not. It's like the old Soviet Union. The two main newspapers were called Pravda and Izvestia. Truth and News. Anyway, apparently the U.S. intelligence agencies are now admitting they don't know how WikiLeaks got the Hillary leaked emails. And remember, just a few weeks ago, Hillary and the Democrats were running around saying, oh, it was Russia, it was Putin, it was Putin, it was Russia. And the corporate media echoed that claim. Oh, yes, it's Russia, it's Putin, he's trying to mess with our elections. Absolutely, it was all his fault. And now we're finding out it was another big lie by the corporate media that is out there trying to still pretend that they are the bastion of truth and knowledge and accuracy, and they're not. And story coming out of HeatST.com from Obama's Polish the Legacy World Tour. And that's what he is. He's running around trying to dictate to everybody how they're going to write about him in their history books. And he actually came on out and has congratulated himself for leading an administration without significant scandal. And I'm sorry, that crosses the line. It is time to have mandatory weekly drug testing for our presidents. Because for Obama to be out there saying no significant scandal, what do you think Benghazi was? What do you think the email server was? Amazing. Obama is already out there saying that after he leaves the White House, his goal is going to be rebuild the Democratic Party. And I kid you not, he said, mold the next Barack and Michelle. Talk about vanity run amok here. I mean, personally, I think if you're going to rebuild the Democratic Party, you might want to rethink which set of blueprints you're going to use. Remember that video that Obama made when Donald Trump said that Obama's going to go down as one of the worst presidents in U.S. history? Which I agree with. And Obama's vanity got the better of him, and he got on TV with his little cell phone and said, well, I may go down in history as one of the world's worst presidents, but at least I'll go down in history as a president. Ha 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 ha. Well, you're not laughing now, are you there, Barry? Amazingly enough, Obama is over there in Europe literally saying, it's okay for protesters to destroy property and incite violence. That's just an expression of your right to freedom of speech. They want these anti-Trump riots to go out of control. And whether it's to declare martial law or delegitimize the election or for who knows what, it's it's almost too obvious what they're doing. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hillary's Tantrum Squad is still pounding on my server. And we're seeing this article that came out of Riv.com, and it's talking about how this former U.S. Senate candidate is out there kind of stating the obvious. The Clinton backers are seeking to delegitimize the Trump presidency before it even gets underway. They're trying to undermine him. Obama's over in Europe trying to undermine Trump by telling all those NATO nations, hey, nothing's going to change. The American taxpayer is still going to be paying for 3/4 of all this NATO stuff. We're still going to have our troops there. We're going to be doing all this stuff. There's nothing for you to worry about. And, of course, Obama cannot speak for President Trump. It's almost like Obama is saying, don't worry, Trump's not going to be president for very long, if at all. Yuck, 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 yuck. Now, we are still getting reports that some of the state electors in states that went to Donald Trump are receiving death threats. Apparently, one of the phrases that is being heard commonly is, if you vote for Donald Trump, you will wind up with a gun in your mouth. Just like Vince Foster. And it's harassment. It's threatening. You're not supposed to threaten people with death. There are rules against that. And in the case of the electors, for this to be out there, if the electors were as foolish as to give the White House to Hillary Clinton, nobody's going to believe it's legitimate. Nobody is going to believe it's the right thing to have done. And there are going to be consequences. Serious, serious consequences. Now, there's already a bias going on in the reported coverage of the anti-Trump protesters. And looking at this article, this was reported by RINF.com, but they're talking about the news coverage, the Not My President. And what they're finding is that, again, as I said, the vast majority of Americans are seeing these protesters as crybabies, sore losers, brown shirt thugs, but it's being reported not as the American people reject the anti-Trump protesters. They've come up with a new name, the extreme center. See, there was the extreme left and the extreme right. Well, now middle America is tired of this crybaby nonsense. Well, they're not middle America anymore. They're the extreme center. And because we've got the word extreme, you should think that they're bad. I mean, it really is kind of ridiculous. Now, over in San Francisco, there's this high school teacher, Fakra Shah, and has created a lesson plan for a course on Donald Trump on the fact that he is a racist and a sexist. Now, I don't know about you. I don't think this sort of thing is what high schools are supposed to be teaching. I sort of view high schools as places where you learn about arithmetic, chemistry, engineering, photography, astronomy, physics, things like that, things that might actually lead you to be useful for a job. And remember that story we read yesterday where a study of the millennials around the world in all the industrialized nations says Americans, millennials, are the most useless people that have ever been. They think they're great. They think they're exceptional. They believe they're intellectual elites. They're college educated. I've got a degree in indigenous women's interpretive dance, and I know how to use a cell phone and play computer games, and I'm sure there's a dynamite career path for knowing how to win at Warcraft or whatever they call it. But we know a big part of the problem this last year has been the educational system is just as co-opted as the corporate media to propagandize for the establishment candidate Hillary Clinton. And when Donald Trump won, all those kids in all these classrooms all across America who'd been told by their teachers that terrible, horrible things were going to happen if Trump won, now the kids are freaking out. They're acting out. Their heads are full of all kinds of images that Trump is going to climb into their bedrooms in the middle of the night and set fire to them. And the teachers don't know how to deal with it. Well, they made this mess. So we have the San Francisco teacher is literally putting together a class to teach students that Donald Trump is racist and sexist. Now, Donald Trump's been in the public eye for over 30 years, and nobody ever called him racist or sexist until he started to run for president against Hillary Clinton. And we all know that was a lie. But as is the case with the really important lies, we have to make sure our schools are teaching our children those lies so they will grow up believing them. Like human-caused global warming and the Orthodox history of World War II. We'll put it right in the schools. They'll never have the courage to actually find out for themselves what the truth is. Because there's always that little voice in the back of your head. If you find out the truth, you're going to get an F. Maybe a D-, but an F. Don't go for the truth. Tell the lie, you get an A, maybe a B. But tell the lie, you get a participation trophy. Now, over in France, their Prime Minister, Manuel Valls, is saying that because of the shock win of Donald Trump here in the United States of America, encouraging voters that they can actually overcome crooked elections, it is now very likely Marine Le Pen will become president of France in next year's presidential election, which will pour a lot of salt into Hillary's wounds, and I don't have a problem with that. That is the significance of Trump's victory. Is all over the world, people are realizing, yeah, you can stop those phony elections. You can fix the problem as long as you unite together. And that's where the Democratic strategy really failed, because they were trying as hard as they could to divide us against each other, black against white, young against old, gay against straight, men against women. And in the end, it failed. Donald Trump attracted a lot of the Hispanic and black and female vote. Americans came together as a single American people, and they voted out the old regime. And that has set an example the rest of the world is getting ready to follow. Now, John Bolton is already out there screaming his head off, saying it's time for the U.S. to impose regime change on Iran. Okay, John, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Watch your head getting into the airplane. We'll call Iran, tell them you're on your way. The thing is that John Bolton is very much one of Israel's minions inside our country. Israel wants Iran smashed, just like they wanted Iraq smashed. And remember, all the way back in 2005, when General Wesley Clark blew the lid off this grand U.S. plan to conquer and regime change all of the Middle East oil nations and place them under overt or covert U.S. control to shackle them to the U.S. dollar. The plan was supposed to be over in 2008 with the conquest of Iran. We're now heading into 2017, and Iran is still out there, and John Bolton just can't stand that. We're supposed to be in charge of Iran by now. Really, the Iranian people, and it is their country, seem to have another idea about that entirely. Now, we are getting word that CIA and FBI agents are being urgently withdrawn from Ukraine. And apparently this was reported by former Verkhovna Rada deputy Igor Markov on the Russian debate show The Meeting Place. And according to Markov, this is evidence that the U.S. is slyly withdrawing from Ukraine. I have a different interpretation. There's nothing sly about it. These U.S. assets are running for the border. It's a bug out. Poroshenko is now facing yet another uprising by the Ukrainian people, and they might actually succeed this time. This U.S. covert overthrow from within doesn't work anymore, because the people of the world now understand that's what's been going on. For the first couple of decades after World War II, when the U.S. did it to Iran in 1953 and Chile in 1973, the people of those countries actually believed it was a genuine, organic, grassroots revolution that made their countries into dictatorships. But those days are gone. The entire world understands. The U.S. loves to go into other people's countries. They like to send in George Soros and his non-governmental organizations to kick up unrest and violence to drive out governments that are not willing to do as they're told by the U.S. in order to replace it with a U.S. puppet regime that establishes a dictatorship to plunder that nation and its people for the benefit of the United States of America corporations. Like I said, they did it in Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973. There's a whole list. The U.S. government, since the end of World War II, has tried to overthrow the governments of some 50 other nations, some of them friends. They actually tried to do it to France. And they don't always succeed. Of course, the Iranian coup d'etat of 1953 led to the Iranian Revolution of 1979, and the U.S. has been making stink face at Iran ever since. You're not supposed to break free from our puppet control. What's wrong with you people? Once we give you the Shah, you're supposed to stay our slaves. Harumph, harumph, harumph. Now then, as we've commented before, there is now very obviously a coordinated attempt by the powers that be, the gatekeepers, the corporate media, to try and reassert control over the minds of ordinary people. Be out there with the little pocket watches and the spinning spiral thing saying, you will come back to believe in us. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The ADL is now out there screaming for new laws to combat online anti-Semitism, which of course is any criticism of the actions of the government of Israel. And the ADL is now saying social media platforms have to have buttons so that users can complain about abuse and cause certain posts and links to vanish. Here is the problem. Just as shills can be hired to load up comment boards, they can be hired to send in abuse reports to shut down an article or an entire site. Or in fact, you can even use software to do that. None of these social media platforms have any kind of a mechanism to validate the reports. And I've been through this a couple of times myself, where my site is blocked by various filtering companies and search engines because I have been accused of gay bashing or something. And inevitably, I work through the maze to actually get to a real live human, and I say, have you looked at my website? No. Would you look at it? Okay. Do you actually see anything there that's against your code of conduct? No. Well, then why did you block me? Well, somebody pushed the abuse button. Really? Who? I don't know. You can see where the problem is. And yes, I always get restored and unblocked, but it's still a form of harassment to make me waste the time. Now, here is what is going on. This last election was the wake-up call that the independent media has become a force to be reckoned with, which is why we are now seeing this coordinated attack by corporate media, the government, the ADL, and everybody else. It finally got through to them. They have lost their ability to lie to the public with impunity, and lies are what they make the big bucks for. Money junkies do not pay billions of dollars to tell the public the truth. Money junkies pay the big bucks to keep the public dumb and obedient. And now, because of the independent media, the public is waking up. And we're becoming uncooperative. So they've hit the panic button. And all of this, of course, is a repeat of the social upset that we saw around Gutenberg's rediscovery of movable type printing. Now, prior to Gutenberg, books and literacy were reserved to the nobility. You know, you workers, you don't need to read, you don't need to think. We'll just tell you what you need to know. And then books became affordable to the middle class. Literacy spread. Access to information not directly under the control of the nobility and the clergy increased. And the social order had to adjust. Now, obviously they didn't want to. They loved the status quo just the way it was. We're rich, you're poor, we're educated, you're dumb. That's the way we love it. Those institutions that could adjust and adapt to the new reality of a better educated public survived. Those entities and institutions that couldn't adjust and adapt vanished. And the same thing is happening right now. And there are parallels back then about the lengths that the rulers went to try and shut down this thing of affordable books and ordinary people reading. That's how shocking that is. Do you know the very first English translation of the Bible was burned by the church along with the translator? And they tried to buy it all up or control it or whatever. But ultimately, of course, the fundamental nature of the way information flowed through society changed. It was no longer just what the clergy and nobility said and people believed. People were communicating with each other through printing. And the same thing's going on now. And we're seeing the existing social order trying to step down on it, crush it down, because they don't want to have to adapt. They don't want to have to change. They think things are just fine right now. But in the end, Gutenberg's printing press won out. Ordinary people won out. The social order had to adjust and adapt to a better informed, more skeptical population. And they're going to have to do it again. And at this point, they're so scared, they have all but abandoned even the pretense of freedom of speech and democracy. Over in Germany, where Obama is standing with Merkel's out there just saying the Internet has become a disruptive force. It has to be contained and managed and steered by government. This idea of populism, of the people deciding for themselves what policies are best for the nation. That's completely ridiculous. Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. And the big selling point that they're pushing, and Obama is among the worst, is that we're all fake news. They're the real news. And the fake news is a threat to democracy. Now, the only fake news sites out here on the Internet are the ones we know the government set up to try and discredit us. UFOs and anything by Sorcia Fall, and that stuff. But we're not a threat to democracy. We are the purest form of democracy, peer-to-peer democracy. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about the new war by the old order on the new order. And it's a pattern we see repeated through history. In fact, to share a little personal anecdote, I was in on the early development of computer graphics and imagery for motion picture work. In fact, when I started, only TV commercials could afford us. But we were never looked at as really part of Hollywood. We're those kids up in the San Fernando Valley, and they make some useful stuff, but they're not real Hollywood. They're not filmmakers. Then, of course, Jurassic Park came along. And overnight, it was obvious computer animation was the future of filmmaking. And the established visual effects houses, for the most part, reacted in panic, trying to smear us with production companies. Oh, they're too expensive, they're unreliable, they're always missing deadlines, they're a bunch of druggies over there. A lot of the old visual effects houses tried to buy a bunch of computers, and because they didn't actually know what they were doing, they went out of business. Industrial Light and Magic being the obvious exception. They were an entity that was able to evolve and adapt to the change, and they're still the biggest in the world right now. Same thing's happening all over again. There's going to be a major change. All right, we're going to take one quick phone call from John in Barbados, then we're going to close the phone lines again. John, are you there? What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thanks for having me on again. Yes, I've got some advice for Mr. Trump. If he wants to save money, close all 800-plus military bases and take all these occupying troops, these dumb, stupid animals, back to America. That will solve a lot of problems.
Well, it's not going to solve the unemployment problem unless you pay all these soldiers to run around and gather up all these refugees and illegals and escort them down to the border. The fact of the matter is these immigrants are taking, American jobs. I mean, look at Michelle Obama. She's being replaced by an immigrant.
Yeah, well, the same thing is happening in Europe with all the immigrants.
Yes.
Although the participation rate in the labor market isn't quite so high. it is in America.
It's not even all that high here in America. Most of these people are coming on in, and they're going right on all these free social services they're being offered, and it's a huge drain on the taxpayer. We just can't afford all this stuff. We can't afford to support millions of refugees and illegal immigrants. We can't, along with Obamacare and all these carbon and green stuff. We're being nickel and dimed to death, and then they wonder why the economy is locking up, because we've got no money left over to actually buy anything that's in the stores anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, at least if they bring all these troops home, they'll save an enormous amount of money, notwithstanding the overseas payments, the extra payments that these troops get for being in foreign climes.
Plus, in many cases, there's lease payments to the host country for the land and the rest of it, and the upkeep of these foreign bases. But I think a sudden return of all those troops would create an unemployment problem, and that actually occurred at the end of World War II, where they had to very slowly bring back all of the soldiers from the Pacific and Europe, and let this batch get jobs and get settled in, then we'll bring another batch in. And, in many cases, it was like 6-7 months before they were able to get everybody home because they didn't want to shock the job market. Okay?
Well, the thing is, to then to start spending the money on the infrastructure and what have you that was previously spent on this useless military.
John, you still got to pay these service people something. They still got to have a job. That's the part. It's not like they're simply going to disappear if you close those bases. It's a larger issue than just saying the bases are closed. Got to let you go. Take a break for top of the hour station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and just finishing up on John from Barbados' comment. One of the complaints I've had with our government for so many years is they'll get an idea in their head and they won't think it all the way through. And I have a lot of respect for John in Barbados, but he just illustrated my point exactly. Oh, we can save a lot of money closing those bases and bringing all those troops home. Okay, what happens to them after they get here? What's the next step? What's going to happen when all of these new bodies hit that job market and there aren't jobs for them? That's what I mean about thinking things through. Anyway, getting on back to the war on the independent media, Barack Obama is now out there saying that, yes, Clinton lost to Donald Trump because of that gosh darn social media and independent media talking about all her scandals and her crimes. You're not supposed to do that. If you're a loyal American, you forget about the corruption and you listen to the slogans and you watch the commercials and you vote the way we want you to vote. And that's what I meant when I was saying before. This election was the wake-up call. They're finally accepting. They've been in denial for a lot of years, but they're finally having to accept. They've lost control of the minds of America. The independent media is out here. It's real. They're going to have to deal with it. Of course, their approach to deal with it is to get a sledgehammer and say, we will crush you. We can't stand freedom of speech. So the corporate media's out there, and they're all gathering around that saying, fake news. It's all fake news. It's all fake news out there. Okay. So let's go back and look at the corporate media and their track record. And I put together this wonderful little graphic that's already gone viral all over the net. Somebody even made a YouTube video out of it already, which I've got posted to the front page. And it goes down this entire list of the history of all the ridiculous stories that the corporate media has fed us. The Spanish-American War. William Randolph Hearst understood that nothing sold newspapers more than having a war. So when the USS Maine blew up in Havana Harbor, he ran a story that the ship had been sunk by a Spanish mine. It was an act of war. It was horrible. Now, the captain of the USS Maine, Captain Sigsbee, actually, in his report said, we had an onboard fire. Got out of control, touched off an ammunition magazine. And the Hearst newspapers and the pro-war politicians were out saying, we've got to court-martial Captain Sigsbee for not seeing what is so obvious to all. And, of course, back in 1974, Admiral Hyman Rickover conducts an investigation and finds out, yeah, Sigsbee was telling the truth. The Hearst newspapers were lying. They wanted a war to sell papers. The U.S. government wanted a war to become the empire. Then we went on about how the corporate media lied about Israel's attack on the USS Liberty being an accident, and it's since come on out that, no, Israel intended to sink that ship and frame Egypt for it. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. The lie about Saddam's nuclear weapons. Assad's sarin. And they have the gall to say that we're the fake news. Got a couple of quotes for you here. Our job is to give people not what they want, but what we decide they ought to have. That was Richard Salent, former president of CBS News. News is what someone wants to suppress. Everything else is advertising. That's the former NBC News president, Reuben Frank. Now, asked to give a toast before the prestigious New York Press Club in 1880, John Swinton, chief of staff at the New York Sun, made this candid confession. And he was held in high regard by his fellows at the time. He was called the dean of his profession. And he said, "There is no such thing at this date of the world's history as an independent press. You know it, and I know it. There is not one of you who dares to write your honest opinions, and if you did, you know beforehand it would never appear in print. I am paid weekly for keeping my honest opinions out of the paper I am connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries for similar things, and any of you who think otherwise are basically living in a dream world. We are the playthings of rich men." And I'm paraphrasing that last part. Then there was Edward R. Murrow's famous speech about wires and lights in a box, where he got up and he said, you know, this can be the most amazing tool for education and informing of the public, but only if those in charge wish to use it that way. Remember when Juanita Broderick first came out with her accusations that she'd been raped by Bill Clinton? She had 4 corroborating witnesses. NBC spiked the story under White House pressure. ABC also had the story, spiked it under pressure from the White House. Fox News, to their credit, ran the story. Then there was the famous ABC Primetime Live Food Lion scandal. Now, Food Lion is a chain of supermarkets, and they, at the time, were non-union. I don't know what their status is right now. But the union was trying to get in there. We're going to take a quick second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. We're talking about whether it is the independent media or the corporate media who are the liars. Corporate media is out there saying independent media, they're all fake news. It's all nonsense. You should believe us. So we're going over the track record and the history of the corporate media, and we're talking about the ABC Primetime Live Food Lion scandal. So Food Lion was a supermarket, and ABC's Primetime Live decided to do a story on them, and they were assisted by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, who gave them phony references. The union was trying to get into Food Lion. Food Lion was resisting. And the producers went in, got jobs at Food Lion, working in the market, secretly taping the Food Lion workplace. And they had footage of meat being dropped on the ground and then just being put back into the package. And they aired it, and of course, Food Lion was seriously, seriously damaged. Then it came on out that the person dropping the food on the ground was one of the ABC producers. And they edited the tape to hide the fact that everything that they had shown that was this horrible, unsanitary, unsafe conditions at Food Lion was being done by these undercover producers. And Food Lion sued and was awarded $5.5 million worth of damages. Then there was NBC. I even remember this one. I'm old enough to remember it. NBC News did a story on side-mounted fuel tanks on General Motors truck. And this was basically where General Motors trucks still had side-mount fuel tanks, and a competing truck company had gone with totally internal, and they needed NBC to bash GM's side tanks in order to hurt their sales and bring people over and buy their cars. So NBC produced and aired a video segment that showed a vehicle bumping into the side fuel tank of a GM truck at low speed, and the GM fuel tank exploded. It later came out NBC had rigged this side fuel tank with explosives to get a big bang. They got sued for a huge amount of money. And, of course, for those who've been following the Clintons for a lot of years, there was actually a video interview done of former executive producer of 60 Minutes, Don Hewitt. And he was talking about the Jennifer Flowers segment and how 60 Minutes edited it specifically to make her look like a fool and help Bill Clinton win the nomination. It's actually on video. The executive producer of 60 Minutes saying, yeah, we were a doctor for the candidate. That's what they do. Other people, members, are posting articles on what really happened, and you can go out and find out them. NBC News caught using a green screen. Remember down at this nightclub shooting in Florida, and they had a woman in the street interview, only she wasn't really in the street. They basically laid her over a camera shot of the shooting scene, but you can see in her glasses the reflections. She's inside a studio. CBS, CNN, Salon caught creating fake news to help sell the war in Iraq. BBC, CNN, Fox changing the words on a video interview from napalm to chemical weapons. And they have the gall to say the independent media is the fake news. Pardon the coughing. It's anyway. One analysis from Pundit Fact estimates 60% of Fox News' facts are really lies. It's that bad. And remember all last year, we were getting all these phony videotapes of ISIS beheading that turned out to be special effects. They were showing them all over. So who's the fake? Who's the fake out there? Here in the independent media, we didn't tell you Saddam had nuclear weapons. We didn't tell you Assad was using sarin gas on his own Alawite supporters. We're not the ones trying to take 100 million out-of-work Americans and somehow massage that to an under 6% unemployment figure. Are we? We weren't the ones telling you Hillary is leading by 12 points going into the election. Even Sean Hannity is breaking ranks and saying he'll never trust the New York Times again because it's become the print voice for Move On, Occupy, Black Lives Matter, the alt-radical left crowd. Now, the New York Times has gone on the warpath on Trump's Twitter account, saying it is fake news. At the same time, they were caught lying about Ivanka. And basically the New York Times was saying, well, he's using Twitter as a media outlet. Yeah, that's what Twitter is for. That's what social media is for. It's our media outlet. And the New York Times is out there saying, he should release everything through us. Well, if it was going to come through without being severely bashed about and twisted, maybe. Then the New York Times came on out with this claim that Ivanka is in charge of Trump's blind trust. Absolute, complete, total fabrication to try and make it look like there was some kind of a conflict of interest and fun and games with that blind trust, which we know the Clintons are famous for. I mean, at this point, the New York Times is making the Inquirer look like responsible journalism. Now, Donna Brazile is still on her Feel Sorry For Me tour, saying that CNN ripped her a new one for rigging the debates for Hillary, and there's another example of who the fake news really is. CNN was giving Hillary Clinton questions ahead of time for the debates in the town halls. So who's the fake here? Another poll has come on out revealing that the rampant and obvious bias has cost the media its credibility. This is another one that confirms less than 6% of the American people still trust that corporate media. And if corporate media thinks that getting on up there and saying, we're telling the truth and they're all fake, is going to get any traction, of course not. It's already too late for that. Maybe when it was still 50% of America believing the corporate media, that might work. But with only 6% of America believing the corporate media, for them to get up there now and say, we're the truthful ones, they're all fake, after the long track record of lies and deceptions. Remember John F. Kennedy's assassination? The corporate media, oh yes, it was a lone nut assassin. Lee Harvey Oswald did it all by himself from that book depository. And then, of course, the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded, based on actual scientific evidence, there had been multiple shooters in Dealey Plaza, and therefore there was a conspiracy. How many times do you have to be lied to by the corporate media before you realize that's what they're paid to do? And they're caught at it. And now they're whining and crying. They don't want to accept responsibility for what they've been doing to the American people and the American nation for 100 years or more. Oh, no, it's all the fault of those people who pointed out that we're lying. We're just doing what we're paid to do, which is to lie to you and sell you things. That's our job. You know, how dare these troublemakers come along and point out that the products we're selling really aren't safe. And we've lied about side-mounted fuel tanks and vaccine safety and GMO, and a little radiation is good for you. They think we're the bad guys here because we called them on the frauds. Now, over on Twitter, WikiLeaks has just released a photo of Google Alphabet Chairman Eric Schmidt actually wearing a Clinton campaign staff badge. For those of you who still hadn't quite picked up on the fact that Google was very much on Hillary's side during this entire campaign. Now, I understand that Google and Facebook are private companies. I think it is time, given the importance of social media, it has become an institution, it's become a utility that we depend on. It should be a public utility. There should be a taxpayer-funded, non-biased, non-filtered social media platform for us to use so that we are not constantly under surveillance by Google and being blocked and filtered at the whim of this or that vested political interest. By the way, for those of you who are sick and tired of Google, there are now alternatives. GoodGopher.com is a new search engine that will actually preferentially search the independent media to find answers to your questions. Yandex, of course, is this Russian search engine, which is quite powerful. And I use it a lot because I don't have to worry about Google keeping track of where I'm going. I actually trust Russia to respect my privacy more than the United States. And Yandex has just come out with their own browser, which is very capable. I started using it yesterday. And I don't have to worry about some American company spying on me through that. Now, somebody went out on Twitter and they did an experiment. They created 2 accounts, and then they did 2 tweets. The first tweet said, I F-word hate white people and their inconsiderate rear ends for voting for Trump. Another obscenity. The second tweet was, I F-word hate black people and their inconsiderate rear ends for voting for Clinton. Repeat of great obscenity. Now, the first comment about hating white people and hating Trump was declared by Twitter not to be in violation of Twitter's rules regarding abusive behavior. The second one about hating black people and Clinton resulted in the user account being banned. Can you say hypocrisy? Can you say double standard? I knew you could, children. By the way, talking about fake news and everything, I was looking at Facebook. There was an ad on one side about how Jane Fonda had passed away, which was a surprise to me. And I had the pleasure of knowing and working with her briefly at Fox. So like an idiot, I clicked the link, and I immediately got hit with a virus attack. This from Facebook. Not some fringy little out-of-the-way website, you know, like whatreallyhappened.com. This was on Facebook. They are carrying ads that plant malware, and apparently they don't care as long as they're getting their checks. Oh, and by the way, Jane Fonda is still with us. I checked with the Internet Movie Database. Facebook. There we are. Okay, turning to the economy, and with a wonderful talent for stating the obvious, Sputnik News is out there pointing out Russia is becoming the new center of gravity for Eastern Europe. And we are seeing that with Moldova pivoting toward Russia. Marine Le Pen is saying she wants to have closer relations with Russia. Russia's looking very attractive as a partner. They're certainly not the ones going around trying to conquer and take over everybody else's country. But German journalist Frank Nienhausen is saying the EU used to be the center of gravity for many Eastern European countries. Now it's shifted. It's over in Russia. There's no longer any enthusiasm to be part of the EU, and certainly the impetus within the EU is to get on out. And the latest one, they're calling it Quitally. They didn't want to do an I exit for Italy, so they came up with a whole new word, Quitally. Italy wants out, especially after that scolding they got from Juncker about how you're not complying with our rules to impoverish your people and give us their money. What's wrong with you, Italian people? So now they're talking about leaving, and they've got a referendum coming up. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're still talking about this idea that the corporate media and the government are at war with us in the independent media. The election was a wake-up call. All of a sudden, they're realizing they've lost their ability to lie to the public with impunity, and they don't know how to work without that. They have gotten by with lies, fraud, and deception so long, they don't know any other way to run a government. Now, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback on that graphic I did earlier today about all the different lies the corporate media has done, but there's one more way to sum this all up. For all these people who are still out there believing that because they're watching MSNBC and CNN that they've got a good bead on what's going on in the world. And that is simply to remember your history. Because look back at Nazi Germany. Their corporate media lied to the German people. Their radios, newspapers, about how great the Führer was and how they were the master race and it was their destiny to conquer the world. And, of course, Germany isn't around any longer. Then you had the Soviet Union, especially under Stalin. Their corporate media, newspapers and radio, oh, Stalin is great. Lysenko wheat is wonderful, and all this other stuff, plus some rigged elections, and the Soviet Union isn't around any longer. So why would anybody with half a brain think the corporate media is behaving any differently here in the United States of America? And any answer that they're going to give you is not only dangerously naive, but it's ultimately racist. Oh, we don't do that here because we're Americans and we're the good guys. Really? You're a tyrant's wet dream. It's amazing. Like I said, the problem with modern liberalism is they're not intellectual elites. They're uninformed, narrow-minded, arrogant in their ignorance. They got a participation trophy and think that makes them superior. All right, we're going to go ahead and start grabbing phone calls. Ken in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Trying to think. They think you're stupid, start with.
Yeah, they've always had a tremendous tendency to underestimate the intelligence of the American people.
That's right. Hey, when you get a chance, use Start page as your hunt on the Internet. It's more private. It says right on it. They don't keep track of anything.
Well, we actually have a button for Start page. We have a button for Start page on the top of what really happened, and I'm going to add web pages, links rather for Yandex. Apparently, it's tricky to find their English language version, so I'm having to look at that.
I know one thing. You go to public library, and if you put in Google or Yahoo, it'll come back to Google and Yahoo. Okay, if you put in Start page, it won't come back. They evidently they can't track you. They don't know what you're doing. See, when you go in a library, put that little blue azure light over there, man, you're telling CIA and NSA, probably got a big bullhorn, and Ken's back on the Internet in Fort Worth, and blah, 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 see what he's talking about. But it won't go back to Start page because they can't track you. That's what it looks like.
Well, I mean, they're filtering a lot of stuff. You know, I remember when I was a kid, the libraries where you went to learn stuff and find things out. And, you know, today, I mean, I get emails all the time from people who are trying to access my website from libraries. It's blocked. This is a known hate site. The libraries, like the universities, have become rigid enforcers of the status quo and the official version of everything. And I'm not at all surprised that Start Page is not there.
And sometimes I get a green page. You can't get rid of it. You don't know where it comes from. You know, they put a block in it. You ain't going to see that. I think they do that. And also, you remember that congressman that put a thing in the congressional record that how many of these newspapers, they were bought up, their editorial departments are bought up?
Yeah.
McFadden, is that who it was?
McFadden, I think.
And also, how many of these editorial departments today are bought right now?
Well, all of the editorial departments of all the major media are under the control of their corporate owners, of which there's only about maybe 6 or 7. And that's why when you read the editorials in multiple newspapers, it's basically word-for-word copies. It's all sent down from on high. There's no diversity of opinion. And that, of course, is completely contrary to the way this nation was set up with regards to media. Anyway, listen, Ken, we're going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And a listener wrote in to remind me there was an aspect of the repatriation of American troops in World War II that is different from our current situation. During World War II, as the men went off to fight, the women were encouraged to leave home and take over those factory jobs. It was the days of, corporate media conditioning people with Rosie the Riveter and we can do this and, sort of an early version of feminism. And then, of course, once the World War was over, corporate media reversed itself and began to glorify the joys of the stay-at-home mom. We had TV shows like Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver, where the image of the American woman was back in the house to leave the job behind for the returning soldiers to do. So even back then, even in the middle of victory, corporate media's job is to manipulate you and get you to do what the government wants. We're going to take a couple more phone calls. Ernest in Nevada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, first I'd like to make my point by saying you, sir, are a crude nationalist, populist, and an evil isolationist.
Okay.
Well?
Yeah, I'm proud of it, too.
Exactly. That's my point, Mike, is that they don't have to lie anymore. They can just frame these words in a way that makes the masses think, well, that's bad. 30 years ago, being a nationalist was great. Now, you're being bad. Crude nationalist is what Obama was saying in Greece, if you remember.
Yes.
And see, I was trying to make that, I was being,
No, I understand what you're doing. I mean, today nationalism is trying to be turned into a bad word, but, I remember when I was a kid, it was all God bless America and the national anthem, and we were supposed to feel good about being the United States of America. And now under George Soros and all of his globalist buddies, somebody loving their own country, that's a bad thing, that's horrible. And
right, and the problem is that the 3/4 or 2/3 of the population wait to be told what's good or bad. You don't have to lie to them. You can just say, being a nationalist, that's bad, and they'll that's how they make their opinions, and they know that.
10, 15 years ago, yes, but I think that is now no longer true. That's what the Trump election proved. That the corporate media has lost the ability to tell the public what is important, what is not important, what they should be excited about, what they should ignore. They've lost that ability, and that's why they're in a panic right now. I mean, we're being told that we have to be in an absolute uproar over any time when a white person attacks a black person, but when a black person attacks a white person, no, that's not important. It's just not part of the equation anymore. Go away. And but now everybody is seeing through all that and saying, yeah, media is biased, and by the very nature of its job description, it has to be biased. It's there to skew perception away from reality in service to government and corporations.
We need, Mike, people in the media to actually say, no, nationalism is not bad. It's good. And somebody to actually say those things. Otherwise, they will eventually pull these masses back to that,
No, they won't.
That way.
No, they won't.
I hope not.
Only 6% of the American people still trust the corporate media. CNN's viewership numbers dipped below that of the Gardening Channel a couple of weeks back here. The majority of the American people are over here looking at the independent media. They've done tracking of where people were going to get their political news this last election cycle, and the independent media had a larger audience than all of the corporate media, and that's why they're in an absolute panic. So all that we need to do is to have people in the independent media say, nationalism is good, love of your country is good, a desire for your country to be better is a good thing.
Right. What about the millennials? So they're a lost generation. Do you think that we
certainly are? They're not useful for anything. Right. I mean, I was appalled looking at that study yesterday because they still had the actual test online. I understand it's been taken down since then. But I went out and I looked at the test. I mean, it was absurdly simple. I aced it to brag a little tiny bit. But you look at it and you say, why are they even having to test college-level people for this kind of stuff? Here's a thermometer. Please tell us what temperature it is showing in Fahrenheit. I mean, I'm not kidding. That was an actual, they had a picture of a thermometer and a dial and the two indicators F and C, and you're supposed to figure out which is the F and which is the C. That's grade school stuff. And for American millennials to score at the bottom or close to the bottom in every single category, this is exactly the fodder that tyrants need to build their fanatics from, but fortunately they're a minority. When these poor kids actually have to confront the real world and try and get a real job and actually produce something useful, are they in for a shock? They don't make enough Play-Doh and coloring books to deal with all of these millennials who are going to be having breakdowns in the streets.
Well, yeah, long term, though, when they become the dominant population, we are in trouble, and we, the mid-boomers, are to blame for it. We're responsible for what happened to them, bringing them up.
I'll agree with your second part to a point. I mean, I certainly have been opposing the way education has been treating our kids, but as far as becoming the dominant segment of society, it's not going to happen. We're going to skip right over them. We're going to go from this generation, hand off power and control to the grandchildren. And this group of millennials, right, they're going to wind up being like the beatniks, or the vast majority of the hippies. That we're going to skip right over them because they can't do anything. They can't build the country. They can't run the country. They can't do anything useful because they were taught to believe, not to think, and that makes them useless. They're going to be left out of the political equation, except for the part where they run around and break windows and burn cars and beat up people. They're still part of the political process that way.
In your opinion, what percentage of the popular vote was actually, corrupt for Hillary? What would you say, 10%?
We can't actually know. That's the real tragedy. That's the real well, I'm aware of VoteFraud.org is saying at least 3 million non-citizens voted for Hillary Clinton. Right. I saw one study that said 1.2 million dead people voted for Hillary Clinton. I got word of another study that says it was actually closer to 5. The crime of our current election system is we don't know. This system is designed to facilitate cheating and theft, and there's no double check, there's no accuracy. I remember leading up to the election, Hillary's lawyers were running around every single state that still had a voter ID law and getting some liberal judge to say, well, yes, it's discriminatory to tell non-citizens they can't vote. No, it isn't. It's the law. Okay? And I'm sick and tired of all these liberals running around here and saying, well, if you've got a problem with illegal immigrants, you're just being racist. And say, moron, illegal isn't a race. And they don't get it. They don't get it.
The two most important things are fixing our voting system and our educational system. Those are the two long-term things that we have to have changed now.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. I'm going to be focusing my efforts on the election system. As soon as Trump is safely in the White House, that's going to be the focus of my efforts. But you're absolutely right about education. We need to get rid of Common Core. I am sure that when Donald Trump gets wind of that report of how utterly useless America's millennials are to the economy of the nation, he's going to say this was definitely the wrong way to go. And we're going to see that Common Core being given the heave-ho. Common Core was never about education. In fact, it was a big lie. It was out there telling people that they're educated, but without educating them. These people think that because they've got a degree in some art history thing that they're actually functioning, intelligent people, and they're not. For one thing, art history just requires scholarship. You don't have to think about it. The goal of the education system was a generation of Americans who can't think, can't analyze, can't see what's going on, just accept what they're told and believe it and act on it, which is the perfect fodder for tyranny. But, you know, again, these people are useless. We actually can't build an economy around the millennial generation of the United States. There are a few exceptions, obviously. But according to this EST... That was their intention,
Mike, all along.
Well, their intention was obedient workers, obedient slaves, but along the way they also made them ineffective, especially in competition with the rest of the world. Anyway, listen, got to let you go. And we got a couple more phone calls here, then we're going to be closing the lines for the Lady Claire. Frank in London, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Just following up on the conversation you just had with the previous caller. I've realized I can get a very intelligent conversation from my grandchildren, some of them are just about over 10 years old, than people in their 20s, early and late 20s.
Yes.
And it's unbelievable. You know, it's unbelievable. Like, a simple question, some of them, I'm not kidding you, some of them do not even know what an atom is or what it means. And I'm not joking, I'm telling you seriously.
No, I believe you. I mean, when I was looking at this test that was being given to college graduates, and there's stuff on there that I consider that, you know, was grade school level, you know, we have got a serious, serious problem. And what is really the problem with these millennials, I mean, they're being turned into fanatics. They're being told that they're educated and brilliant and entitled and exceptional, and they're not. They don't have enough smarts to realize the degree to which they're being lied to.
No, and you've got people in Britain here, I can tell you now, this is a fact, that you've got people who haven't had any proper fundamental primary school education. They get a kind of education, I can hardly describe it. Yet these are the same people who are going to universities, ending up with some sort of useless degree in art, some sort of art or something, but they get a degree in it, they come out, they can't get a job, and now they owe in so much money, and they have to pay back this money.
And they're living with their parents, and then they're out there screaming that this is all the fault of some convenient imaginary persecutor. It's the patriarchy. It's the white people. It's, you know, it's
Nigel Farage and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and the rest of it.
So it's really awful, and I've realized even the corporate media and corporate companies have infiltrated every aspect of our life. I picked up a book called Biology for Dummies, and they had actually in there I found an argument for GMO food. I couldn't believe it.
Was it in the text, or was it an ad?
It was in the text. They had an argument for it, an argument against it, but I couldn't believe they had an argument for it when overwhelmingly, you know, GMO food is dangerous. I remember seeing a documentary on RT where a guy from America, some agent, went over to Kenya, and he offered these seeds to these women, these Kenyan farmers, and the women who he thought, because they were rural people, he thought they were stupid, they actually chased them away and said, we've been planting here for this land for about 400 years, passed down from our ancestors, and we've been yielding good crops, and if we take this seed, now you're going to own us. And they told him to, you know, get on his bike. Yeah,
well, that's exactly the whole point of GMO. Monsanto owns you and your farm and your crops if you use their seeds. Anyway, Frank, I got to let you go. And before I take this last phone call before the top of the hour, I want to follow up on a story that caused a lot of consternation. Apparently, yesterday, there was an airplane flying over the city of Denver in this racetrack oval pattern over and over and over again, and everybody's saying, what the heck is this? And everybody was very closed-mouthed about it. The Denver airport said that they were unable to make contact with this airplane. Well, finally today, the U.S. Navy has shuffled their feet and looked at the ground and admitted it's one of their aircraft. And as a matter of fact, it's called a TACAMO aircraft, which is an acronym for Take Charge and Move Out. It is an airborne command post to run World War III. And it was on some kind of a training flight that took it from the West Coast, orbited over Denver, and then flew on to Oklahoma. And I mention this because we're seeing a lot of increased activity at the military bases here in Hawaii. And I think I mentioned before the election that those who want this new world war, if Trump were to win the election, might try and provoke it and start it before he can get into the White House and pull the plug, which may explain Obama's running around the NATO nation saying, you don't have to worry about anything. We're still going to have troops here. We're still going to be plundering the American people to pay for all the bombs and bullets. Nothing to worry about. John McCain is out there saying, don't you dare make friends with the Russians. Do you know how hard we've worked to take off those Russians? Don't you dare make friends with them. Josh Bolton is out there screaming, we got to do a regime change on Iran. Okay, John, here's your rifle. So they may try and do something. In fact, I saw one newspaper article saying that Russia will invade someplace sometime in the next 2 months. So the war hawks are still out there doing that. Okay, let's see. Back to the phones. Jeff in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thank you for taking my phone call. I wanted to ask, what do you think about this this war on cash? Like, how it's been progressing. Now you see in some Chase banks in Australia is not taking any cash whatsoever, and in India they've already gotten rid of their highest denomination notes, and I think that took out like 60% of their commerce. Like they have to use.
Yeah, they had a major lockup of the economy. Gold shot to $2,800 an ounce. The reason for the cashless society, it is a continuation of this evolution of removing from the people any kind of control over their own wealth. When the United States was started, the physical coinage was the money. There was silver in the silver dollars. See, I got one around here somewhere. Well, just imagine. The silver in the silver dollar was the money. Once it was in your hand, there wasn't anything the banks or government could do to change its value, and you could just spend it wherever you want. That was your freedom. And then over time, we lost that when we got the fractional banking system in the Federal Reserve, and finally, right after John F. Kennedy was killed, they removed the silver from the coinage. And at that point, the Federal Reserve notes, instead of saying can be exchanged for lawful money at the banks, started saying, well, this ink and paper is the lawful money. And that gave the Federal Reserve and the government the power to control what that money was worth even after you earned it and put it in your pocket. And now, in order to forestall the possibility of runs on the bank, they want to have a cash-free society so that all the wealth is in the banks and you're just allowed to move it from one place to the other. And it's a system of enslavement, and I absolutely oppose it, and so should you. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely lady Claire getting on over to the refugee crisis over in Italy, and I'm sure this is one of the things that is propelling them towards their own independence referendum. There's a video showing this 80-year-old hotel owner trying to barricade the doors to his hotel to avoid being forced to house a rather large group of so-called refugees, all of whom appear to be military-aged males from Africa. What is going on? This is all, we're supposed to be feeling sorry for all these people, fleeing war and all these women and children. It turns out to be all these very young men. Well, a survey by Doctors of the World has revealed that only 13.7% of the migrants in Europe say they are fleeing war. Everybody else is saying they're taking advantage of the open borders to try and get into a better economic situation at the expense of the economic situation of the people who are already living there, of course. Now then, more reports, more confirmation from all around the globe. Global cooling is setting records. It's going to be another very hard winter. And so, to nobody's surprise, the Washington Post has come out with an article desperately trying to float the global warming hoax by saying the North Pole is 36 degrees warmer than normal. Now, apparently, the global warming people have been embarrassed by all these times when they'll say we're going to have a snow-free winter. Remember 2009, the Met Office, Great Britain, what an embarrassment that was. UK independent all the way back in 2000. Snowfalls are now a thing of the past. So now what they're going to do is say that their proof and evidence of global warming is way far away in remote locales that they know you cannot visit to check for yourself. And in any event, you can't rule out there's an undersea volcano involved down there. And here's something when anybody talks about global warming and we're warming the oceans and the oceans are rising, and just say, how many active volcanoes are there on the floor of the world's oceans? And you will get, and then you can make them feel better, because they're buttercups, saying, don't worry, it's a trick question. Nobody knows. Nobody knows how many active volcanoes and thermal vents there are on the floor of the world's oceans, and hence, they don't know how much heat is being poured into the ocean from those geothermal sources. And without having that to factor out, anybody claiming that humans are warming the ocean, it's just what we call a swag, a scientific wild-ass guess. That's all it is. It's not science, it's propaganda. And people are beginning to step back and realize that even the people who have fallen for global warming are realizing that spending $100 billion on policies which might decrease the global temperature 1/100th of a degree over several decades is pretty much a waste of time. In any event, the sun is cooling, we're going into a new Maunder minimum, and we're all going to be cold. All right, we got to take a break for top of the hour station identification. Back with the Lady Claire. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And if you're watching on BAM User, that gorgeous creature just getting into place behind me and putting on her ears is the lovely Lady Claire, who likes to join us on hour number 3. And while she's getting settled in, I just got an email from one of our listeners reminding me that on that graphic I did of all the lies the corporate media has told us, I should have included the Lusitania. And yes, I should have, because the corporate media was out there saying, oh, it was just a passenger ship, those poor innocent people, we have to go to war against Germany because of this horrible atrocity. And as we all know, the Lusitania was in fact carrying weapons, smuggling weapons from the United States to Great Britain, which made it a legitimate target of war. And the government of Germany had actually taken ads out in the New York newspaper saying, do not sail on the Lusitania, we are going to try and sink it. But you know, if I added all of the instances where the corporate media has lied to you to that graphic, you'd never be able to download it. It would be that large. Okay, we're going to bring up the Lady Claire's microphone here. And
Aloha.
What is the first story that you want to talk about?
Well, I want to kind of add on to that area of fake news that you have just discussed. And it has to do with what the, how can I do this nicely? The newsy-floozies, we should call them politely,
okay,
have not been saying. And one of the things they have not been covering at all, Mike, is the horrific situation with the Saudi campaign in Yemen. The Yemen people have lost thousands of their citizens, more wounded, and also this is something that is starving children because of the naval blockade of Yemen.
Yes.
And so one thing I say to the alleged newsy-floozies, okay, folks, bring it on. Let's talk about this, because we need to have a national dialogue about the degree to which the United States is enabling Saudi Arabia in this war. They're bombing hospitals, they're bombing schools, and allegedly with American guidance. And where is any reporting on this? Have the Saudis bought the tongues of all of those mainstream news stations, one has to wonder, you know. And I'd like to sort of segue into three related stories at the top of things I wanted to cover.
Okay.
Backlash. Prominent conservative James Woods quits Twitter in censorship protest. Days after Twitter unleashed a purge of so-called alt-right accounts, deleting users without explanation, many speculated that this would lead to an angry backlash in which conservative pundits using Twitter would voluntarily leave the struggling social network in protest over Twitter's suddenly rampant and dubious censorship. And overnight, this was confirmed when actor and prominent conservative James Woods tweeted that since Twitter is now in the censorship business, I will no longer use its service for my constitutional right to free speech. Goodbye, all.
Good for him.
And he also changed his bio to say Twitter has now sadly abdicated its position as a beacon of free press. And as we warned earlier this week, while Twitter has every right to block and delete any users it chooses, even if one may question its preference to focus on right-wing conservative accounts, even as the Islamic State terrorist accounts continue to proliferate within Twitter, there's a big risk for the company whose growth has already peaked, resulting in price share plunging and leading to numerous rotations at the corner office and mass layoffs. And it's pushing away as much as half of its audiences.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Well,
yeah.
I don't know if you were listening earlier in the show, where somebody, as an experiment, created 2 Twitter accounts, and on one he put a screed that basically said, F the white people and everybody who supports Donald Trump, and on the other he basically said F the black people and everybody who supports Hillary Clinton, and Twitter canceled the account of the one that was saying F the black people, and apparently didn't have a problem with F the white people. And when you have a double standard and hypocrisy like that, everybody notices it.
Yeah. And there was another comment by Edward Snowden to the world. Stop letting Facebook control your news, in an attempt to rationalize the fact that Donald Trump has been elected as the next president of the United States. A growing movement is lashing out against alleged fake news sites, even labeling them responsible for the election results. Yes, we did.
Yes.
Yes, we did. Thank you very much.
Take a bow. Yes, we did that.
And it's interesting. Did you talk about the LA Times publishing the false, misleading, clickbaity document, ending it an air of legitimacy that an assistant professor did? Did you mention that?
It doesn't sound familiar.
Okay. And it's prefaced with a disclaimer. The document is being shared by alleged legitimate news outlets as a legitimate report.
Okay, before you go any further, though, we need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And this, of course, is the lovely Lady Claire.
Aloha.
So pick us up where we are here.
Okay.
This is the LA Times again?
LA Times. Some of the information was true, but overall it was a poor resource to rely on for guidance on reputable news outlets. It almost makes one wonder if this young teacher was conducting her own social experiment to see how seriously people will take a Google document uploaded to Facebook. And now, there are false news sites, but as you've alluded to before on the program, the mainstream media has continued to lie in order to support government agenda. And this goes back a long, long way.
And, of course, the government likes to plant stuff on the independent media to make us look kooky, like the thing about no plane at the Pentagon.
Right.
And, by the way, that is the banner of all of these corporate media attacks on the independent media. They're all fake news sites. They all think there wasn't a plane at the Pentagon.
Yeah. And so there is this tendency to kookify sites like what really happened. But what I am encouraging our listeners and readers to do, don't let anyone define how you get your news or how you view your news. You have to, if you will, celebrate and identify yourself with your own particular viewpoint, which may or may not be that of the corporate media, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of free speech, there was an article in Blacklisted News called Europe, Let's End Free Speech. According to New Europe in Leeuwarden, about 20 opponents of plans to establish asylum centers in the region received police visits at home. In other words, the Netherlands are engaging in state censorship, thereby raising the question, is the Netherlands now a police state? In the town of Sliedrecht, police came to Mark Jongeniel's office and told him that he tweeted too much and that he needed to watch his tone, and his tweets may seem seditious. His offense? One tweet said the College of Sliedrecht comes up with a proposal to take 250 refugees over the next 2 years. What a bad idea. That's all the guy said.
Yes.
That's all the guy said, looking at what is going on in Europe, and, you know, can you blame him? And in September of 2015, Die Welt reported that people who air xenophobic views on social media risk the right to see their own children, while ordinary European citizens risk arrest and prosecution for xenophobic remarks. And but apparently, a German EU Commissioner Günther Oettinger called a visiting Chinese delegation of ministers Schlitzaugen, which means in German, slanted eyes. I mean, hello. I can't believe this, Mike. And clearly the law is not equal. EU commissioners...
No, it isn't. We see that all over the place. Again, with Twitter's bias on these posts, it's okay to say, you know, kill the white people, but if you say kill the black people, you're being racist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it makes no sense except that the mainstream media is running scared. Absolutely running scared.
Well, mainstream media, the corporate media, we're the new mainstream.
Yeah.
The corporate media is scared. Governments are scared. Corporations are scared. They finally are realizing they can't lie to the public with impunity anymore, and they don't know what to do because they've been getting by with lies and hoaxes and frauds and deceptions so long, they've forgotten any other way to run a country, and that's why they're in such a lather right now.
Yeah.
And but again, looking at the poll numbers, where only 6% of Americans still trust the corporate media, standing up there now and saying, we're the truth and they're the bad guys, they're not going to get a lot of traction. It's like when, you know, the old Soviet Union newspapers called themselves Truth, and everybody knew that was absolutely a joke.
Absolutely. Let's also stay in Europe. Apparently, Obama and EU leaders have agreed to keep anti-Russian sanctions over Ukraine. And this is going to continue for a further year regarding the situation in the Ukraine. And Obama met with leaders of Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and the UK today. Among the main topics on the agenda were extending sanctions against Russia, cooperation within the framework of NATO, the rising Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, and possible new anti-Russian sanctions over Moscow's action in Syria. This is insane, and I have a short memo to lame duckling President Obama and the rest of the European leaders who are collectively lying through their teeth to the world regarding the situation in both Ukraine and Syria. And the problem is now that the world knows they're lying through their teeth. The situation in Ukraine was generated by the U.S., NATO, the EU, George, who now has a middle name, the despicable Soros, and the IMF, when they unseated the duly elected President Yanukovych and appointed Poroshenko as the new president in an election that was even more crooked than a dog's hind leg. At that point, Crimea, which had been a part of Russia until it was annexed by Khrushchev, himself a native Ukrainian and was Cyrillic speaking, held a free, fair, and transparent referendum to ask the Crimean people if they wanted to reunite with the Russian Federation, and then petitioned the Russian Federation to accept Crimea as a member, which it did. Mike, Russia did nothing wrong here.
No, Russia did absolutely nothing wrong here. I mean, one only needs to look at the history of the last 20 years to see who the aggressor is in world affairs, and it's not Russia. You know, we have the U.S. and NATO are running all these weapons up to Russia's border.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and every time they do it, they say, "Oh, Russia's making us do it. Russia's the bad guy. Russia's going to attack us if we don't get ready to destroy them."
And their proof? Non-existent.
There isn't any. And they're doing it because they were able to get away with it in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Because people trusted the corporate media when they said, the commies are bad. The commies are coming to get you. There's a red menace.
Yeah.
But, you know, especially for those of us who lived through that, we recognize it all over again. It's just creation of fear and crisis and chaos, so they don't have to take our tax money and actually spend it on us, but they get to keep it all for themselves and buy medals and ribbons and nice things for the uniform and nice heavy trucks to run around in and feel important. You know, compensate for their otherwise lack of manly virtues with a giant bomb.
Yeah. And, I mean, come on, Victoria Nuland, the U.S. Undersecretary of State under Obama, boasted openly about the U.S. having spent $5 billion of your taxpayer monies to destabilize Ukraine.
That's a bargain.
And having said it on the record, she can't unsay it. There's no way for her to walk that back now.
No.
And Syria, the duly elected al-Assad government asked for the assistance of Russia in getting rid of all the jihadists, even those supported and trained by the U.S. government, and now the U.S. government is looking to assassinate all of the jihadist leaders they have trained here so that they don't squeal about who was really behind them. I find that very richly
I think
ironic.
they've already bagged about 30 of them.
Yeah. Oh, they're not going to stop there.
No.
No, definitely not. I'd also like to talk about the economy and the national debt. At this current pace, a record-shattering $2.4 trillion with a T dollars will be added to the national debt this year. Barack Obama is about to become the $20 trillion man. With less than 2 months to go in his second term, the national debt stands less than $150 billion away from the 20 trillion mark that we know of. And at this pace that the debt is increasing, it will seem almost certain that we will cross the $20 trillion border before Inauguration Day. After promising that deficits are under control, the federal deficit jumped by more than $1.3 trillion last fiscal year, and so far this year is on pace to rise by a record-shattering $2.4 trillion. This is a recipe for national suicide.
Well, you know, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, and soon you're talking some real money.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. It wasn't really necessarily an issue that came up much in the presidential debates.
Nobody wanted to talk about the economy.
Yeah.
It's abortion, it's racism, it's, you know, which bathroom to use. That's what you worry about for this election.
And if it's really hard to spend $1 trillion, for example, if you were alive when Jesus was born and you had spent $1 million every single day since that time, you would still not have spent $1 trillion by now. And even though, and this is unfortunate, the Republicans have had control of the House since 2010, the wild spending has not slowed down one bit. In fact, it is actually accelerating as we move to the end of Obama's second term.
And he's going around the world handing out money left and right. He's buying his historical legacy with our money.
Yeah. And there is a point where kicking the can down the road in terms of fiscal U.S. government irresponsibility can't continue. The whole nation, I think, may suffer from that, and I wonder how Trump is expecting to address it.
Well, that's one of the things that I feel bad for Trump. He's very much like Herbert Hoover. He's inheriting an economy that, unless he were to take the dramatic step of simply nationalizing the Federal Reserve and repudiating the debt as having been created through fraud in the first place, I don't see any way to really save this economy. He's going to have to deal with the crash. All I can say is, and I'm going to continue saying it, Donald Trump on his worst day is still a heck of a lot better than Hillary Clinton on her best days.
Amen, brother.
Yes.
Amen to that. I'd like to kind of go over to health and safety issues. Apparently, glyphosate has now been found to contaminate most popular Western foods. And to the people who listen and watch, this is important for you and your family. A recent lab test analysis found a startling amount of Monsanto's weed killer in common consumer goods. Around 29 popular American foods were tested by an FDA-registered laboratory commissioned by the Food Democracy Now! In conjunction with the Detox Project. The Detox Project is accessing newer technology to test glyphosate levels in humans, food, and soil. And this herbicide can wind up in non-GMO food ingredients. Levels in food found in the recent analysis measured between 289.47 parts per billion and at levels as high as 1,125.3 parts per billion. Natural News points out that ultra-low levels of glyphosate can cause harms in human. One study even showed that glyphosate causes breast cancer in parts per trillion. That's a scary thing for us women and the men who love us, you know. And food with high level of glyphosate include General Mills cereal, Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios, Kellogg Corn Flakes, Raisin Bran, Frosted Flakes, PepsiCo's Dorito, Cool Ranch, Ritz Crackers, and Stacy's Simply Naked Pizza Chips, as well as many more products at levels that present significant risks according to the latest independent peer-reviewed science on glyphosate.
Okay, now here's the problem.
Yeah.
These food products have already drunk the Kool-Aid, if you will, on GMO crops, and they're using GMO corn, GMO wheat for the base of their food product offerings. They're being drenched with Roundup, glyphosate, and because of that, some of the glyphosate gets into the crop. And just a quick hosing with water is not going to get it off.
Nope.
And the food companies don't want to actually scrape off the outer contaminated layers of the food because that's expensive technology and it results in less product to sell. And that's why the glyphosate is allowed to get through into our cereal bowls. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, Claire. You've got a story that I think everybody needs to hear.
I do. You talked about the public school teacher who was developing this Trump curriculum. Well, UC Irvine professors have gone this person one better because they are modifying their curriculum to prepare students for life under an avowed white supremacist president. No, you heard me right. Let me back up again. For life under an avowed white racist supremacist president. And we've been sort of grinding our teeth, reading stories of millennials who've been melting down at universities about the Trump victory. Some took to the street to protest and destroy private property, while others were so distraught that they convinced professors to postpone tests or simply cancel classes altogether so that they could stay in bed all day. Well, some professors at the University of California, Irvine have decided to be a little more proactive in addressing the psychological needs of their distressed students who are all apparently finding it difficult to exist in Trump's new America. Specifically, professors of the university's composition department have decided to craft an entire new syllabus that will prepare our students for life under an avowed white supremacist presidential administration. To help start discussion, the administration proposed presenting the following Trump syllabus at a meeting, and it's a mock syllabus of books and readings assembled by a couple of historians, NBD Connolly and Keisha Blaine, as an example of a course that would address the critical subjects of racism, sexism, and xenophobia on which Trump had built his candidacy. Mike, are you flipping kidding me?
That's not what Trump's candidacy was built on. I mean, what it is, the liberals have built themselves these castles in the clouds. That's a sign of neurosis. Now they're trying to move into them.
Yes.
That's the sign of psychosis.
Yeah.
It really is ridiculous. We're back in medieval times where there were college courses on epicycles and how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. They've created this fantasy world of this horrible monster called Donald Trump, and now they're creating college courses, you know, to basically study this made-up mythical monster, or sort of puts on a par with all of these college courses that discuss the history of comic books.
Yeah.
And, oh, yeah, you're going to get a job with that one, too.
You know, I supported Trump because I think this country's been on a very bad road over the last 18 years and is suffering from the corruption of the Clintons.
And the Bushes.
And the Bushes, and the militarism of George Bush, and the globalism of President Obama, all of which have left this country with over 94 million Americans who want full-time jobs but can't find them.
And meanwhile, of course, millions of illegal immigrants and refugees pouring across the border, further stressing our social safety net and our tax base and our job market.
And to ignore these realities is equivalent to touching up an X-ray so the patient doesn't think their cancer is quite as bad as it is. Now, here's the deal for me, and I really want to share this with our readers and listeners. I'm a woman. I'm an entrepreneur with a very clear understanding of a 14-hour working day, and an equity feminist who has understood how to put her educational background in theater into earning, working, doing marketing. We live here on Oahu and love it because of the beautiful diversity and the lovely spirit of its residents. I am very happily married. Mike, my husband, is Pan-Asian. So how the heck does all of this make me racist, xenophobic, and a self-loathing female? The bottom line is it hasn't. And I will not allow these people to define me at all. And apparently these professors have not received the memo that the big lie went out with the whoopee cushion and the dribble glass. Yes, this country still has problems with race and gender equity, but you don't resolve those problems by lying about them, which apparently these university professors feel just entitled to do.
Well, remember, it was the core of Hillary's campaign to try and fan up these issues of racial inequality and gender inequality so that everybody could play victim. Oh, I'm a victim. The reason my life isn't working has nothing to do with the fact that I've got an art history degree. It's the evil men. It's the evil white people. And if we vote for Hillary, she will give us things for free so we can feel good about ourselves. And it really didn't work out very well. And I'll tell you what's really going to be a problem for the liberals. Is the fact that over the next few years, all of these millennials are going to have to deal with the fact they don't have the skills to actually get a job. They're going to have to start learning to pay off those school loans, and that's going to turn them into conservatives. We'll be right back after these few words.
Amen.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And Claire, what is the next story you care to share with us?
Well, I felt that it was very interesting for this gentleman to have said what he said, but I do laud him for having said it. In a related story to what we were just talking about, Jon Stewart slams liberal hypocrisy of labeling all Trump supporters as racist. Recently, comedian and animal rights activist Jon Stewart sat down with Charlie Rose of CBS News to do an interview to discuss his new book, An Oral History. Of course, he also shared his thoughts on the turnout of the 2016 presidential election. Rather than diss Donald Trump, as he's done so many times in the past, Stewart spoke out against the name-calling, which seems to have increased since the business tycoon won more electoral votes than Hillary Clinton. The former host of The Daily Show slammed the hypocrisy of the left liberal-minded thinkers for supposedly rejecting stereotypes, while being quick to label Trump supporters as racist. And this is what he said. I thought Donald Trump disqualified himself at numerous points. But there is now this idea that anyone who voted for him has to be defined by the worst of his rhetoric. Look, there are guys in my neighborhood that I love, that I respect, that I think have incredible qualities who are not afraid of Mexicans, not afraid of Muslims, not afraid of blacks. They're afraid of their insurance premiums, he continued. In the liberal community, you hate this idea of creating people as a monolith. Don't look at Muslims as a monolith. They are individuals, and that would be ignorance. But everyone who voted for Trump is a monolith, is a racist. That's hypocrisy. It's also very real in our country. And good on you, John. I really appreciate that he said that.
I'm kind of sorry he left The Daily Show because it really went downhill after he left.
You know, I love Trevor Noah.
I don't.
But I can't watch him anymore.
No.
I just... Which means that I have turned off all the advertisers for his show as well.
Isn't he one of those celebrities who promised they were going to leave the country if Trump won?
I don't think so, dear.
Oh, darn.
He's a native of South Africa, and Dad is German, Mom is African, and was obviously educated in the best schools possible because his English is brilliant, and I've seen his stand-up, which I love.
Okay.
But just the Trumpomania through this entire election cycle has been a little too much for me to take.
We're in the middle of the trumpeting.
Yes.
Da-da-da.
Yes.
Okay. I'm given the GOP symbol. I'm amazed somebody hasn't actually come up with that yet.
Oh.
The trumpeting.
Oh,
Of the elephant.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Have to pay attention.
Yes,
the
dear.
ideas are coming fast.
Yes, dear. Okay,
All right,
gotcha.
what's next?
Michigan fights to avoid delivering water to Flint residents. And
you want water, you'll buy it from Nestle.
The ongoing crisis has left the city still without safe water drinking for over 2 years, but the state claims water deliveries are too much to ask. Michigan is fighting a judge's order to deliver water to Flint residents who don't have safe drinking water, claiming it would be overly expensive for taxpayers and require a Herculean effort.
Oh, they're all going to die in another 6 months anyway.
You know,
it's just a waste of good water on them.
Last week, U.S. Judge David Lawson, and good on Judge Lawson, ordered that 4 cases of bottled water weekly be brought to each resident who needs it in the wake of the ongoing crisis that has left the city with lead-contaminated water since 2014. Attorneys for the state filed a motion Thursday to stay the order while they appeal the decision in a lawsuit brought by several advocacy groups. The Herculean effort required by the court order would be on the magnitude of a large-scale military operation, Anna Heaton said, spokeswoman for Governor Snyder. She wrote this in a statement that she emailed to the Huffington Post. The resources to accomplish this would only be available through the activation of the National Guard or the hiring of several logistics companies. The state's motion said that it would cost $10.5 million monthly to deliver the estimated 400,000 cases of water each week, and warns that using Flint relief money for water delivery would defund other efforts like nutritional assistance programs for kids.
Now, somebody refresh my memory. Just, what little microscopic amount of money did the city of Flint save by not putting the anti-corrosion chemical into the drinking water after they disconnected from the...
It was minuscule, honey.
Yeah.
Minuscule.
Well, there's your government in action. What can I tell you?
Yeah, clean water is life. Lead-tainted water leads to decline, mental retardation, death, and destruction.
Just ask anybody in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, tell me about it. And I have to wonder, Mike, if this had happened in a more affluent neighborhood, if city and county and state officials wouldn't be out on their collective ears by now, and a reasonable working plan wouldn't be in place.
See, that's the problem. This wouldn't have happened in a more affluent neighborhood.
Yeah. And Flint is 57% African American and dirt poor. And in fact, more than 41% of its residents live below the poverty level, according to the U.S. Census. And NAACP President and CEO Cornell Brooks drew a direct connection between Flint's socioeconomic factors and the toxic water. And to all the officials in Michigan, I have to call you out and say this is not the American way. The Americans are a can-do people. Fix the problem. You can. It's going to be expensive. You were stupid in what you did in the first place. Now is a chance to slightly redeem yourself for the people of Flint, and it's high time you did it.
Well, this is where Donald Trump's working to bring the auto industry back to the United States is going to help cities like Flint, because that was the heart of Michigan. It was car country.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring back the jobs to those people, and they're going to become affluent, and the government's going to have the tax revenues to actually go out and try and deal with these problems. But again, this should have never happened in the first place.
Never.
This was a classic case of people in government thinking a short-term solution, thinking with their spreadsheet, and figuring, so it's a little lead poisoning. Who's going to care?
It's not their kids.
No, it's not their kids.
Yeah.
Remember, the Flint city government was ordering bottled water into their offices. They weren't drinking from the tap water. They were getting nice mountain spring water, or at least something that was reasonably filtered.
Absolutely. I'd like now to go over to Iraq. And apparently the Pentagon is preparing a new base in Iraq. Brand new base.
Okay.
On Wednesday, Captain Nazim al-Jahifi, head of the Al-Sumud Brigade, announced that the U.S. forces are in the process of establishing a new military base in the Haditha district west of Anbar in order to monitor Daesh activities in nearby areas. U.S. forces coming from An al-Assad base in Baghdadi area explored the area's Haditha district in Anbar in order to establish another base in the province to monitor the movements of the Islamic State's members in the western cities. And Iraqi News quoted al-Jaghifi in a statement. Now, Mike, to me, the translation of this is they're looking for ways to assassinate any Daesh leadership which could potentially spill the beans on how they were trained, funded, and supported by the U.S. government.
Well, that's a big problem for Obama and for Hillary Clinton because technically what they were doing, especially in Syria, technically is the crime of treason, aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war.
Yeah.
And, we were all being told ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Daesh are our enemies in the war on terror, and then we find out our president and our Secretary of State were giving them guns, giving them bombs, giving guns to Mexican drug cartels, the Sinaloa cartel at the same time. But you Americans, you don't need firearms. You can trust on the police. They'll take care of you.
Right. In 20 or 30 or 40 minutes.
And then they'll show up and take all your money because they found a marijuana seed in your front yard.
Yeah.
If they don't just shoot you outright.
Yeah.
What a wonderful country.
And apparently Obama is running around Europe and saying Trump mustn't make deals with Russia. Days after publicly assuring NATO that President-elect Donald Trump wouldn't make any serious changes to America's European policy, outgoing President Barack Obama is publicly making statements urging Trump to remain hostile to Russia and not cut deals with the Russian leadership.
So is John McCain.
Yeah.
And it's not up to them.
No.
And what is very alarming to me is it almost seems like Barack Obama is traveling around Europe right now and trying to reassure everybody nothing's going to change. Yep. The U.S. taxpayer is still going to pay for most of NATO. We're going to send our kids over here to be on the front lines there. You don't need to pay attention to Trump. He's not going to be president for very long, if at all. So trust me, nothing's going to change. And that's the only foundation he can have for making the statements he's making, because he is not authorized to speak on behalf of Donald Trump, and as of January 20th, he is a private citizen.
Yep. And I do have a short memo on this. As you know, as our listeners and readers know, the U.S. and NATO in recent months have deployed some 300,000 ground troops right up against the Russian border. So I have a short memo to lame duckling President Obama. President-elect Trump will be president, in fact, come January 20th, and should be making any deals possible in the interests of we the people and peace for this planet. His attempt to tell this man what to do is an absolute embarrassment for this country and demonstrates quite clearly the fact that he is blind to the optics it creates in terms of the future moving forward of the American government.
Well, in the past, it's always been traditional for the outgoing president to very graciously sort of start stepping back into the shadows, and certainly after the transition of office, refrain from criticizing the new president for a year. That's actually the tradition. But we're seeing Obama out there actively trying to undermine Donald Trump's emerging foreign policy during the time of transition. And you have to, again, Obama is not authorized to speak on behalf of Trump, and to go on out there and reassure all of Europe that Trump isn't going to change anything when Trump is saying exactly the opposite. Again, the only foundation for Obama to be making that statement is if he's in on the inside of a plot that Trump isn't going to be president for very long, if at all. And again, we're very concerned about a possible assassination attempt on Donald Trump before the 19th of December, because if Donald Trump dies before the 19th of December, then the Electoral College can hand the White House to Hillary Clinton, and hardly anybody is going to have grounds for complaint. After the 19th, if Trump is assassinated, Mike Pence becomes the president. Even that is not a good thing. So I hope Donald Trump's people are just taking really, really good care of him, because right now Donald Trump has got more elements of the government angry with him than John F. Kennedy did. I mean, the lobbyists hate him now.
Yes.
The EPA hates him. Hillary hates him. The liberals hate him, and without even knowing why. They just, who do I hate today? Donald Trump. Oh, yes, I hate Donald Trump. Give me my paycheck.
And the warmistas.
And the warmistas.
Yeah. I would like to hope that the transition team is looking very seriously at breaking with tradition and doing the oath of office inside with a lot of television cameras and keeping Trump protected at all times when this happens. Doing this out in the open as has been done, even with the area as cleared as they can get, they can't get rid of all of the elements.
Well, that would send a message of fear and weakness. What we might hope for is, knowing a heavy winter is coming, that there might be a major blizzard going on around January 20th, and then Donald Trump could take his oath of office securely inside the Oval Office and televise it and not appear to have been scared inside by all of these brown shirt thugs working for Hillary Clinton.
So all of you out there who do pray for snow on Inauguration Day, would you? I think I'm going to.
And for all you atheists out there, go ahead and annoy a liberal.
Yes, definitely. Well, what do you think are Hillary's chances right now? I mean, it seems like she's being eased out in some way. Do you think that's actually going to happen once we get through the 19th of next month and the 20th of January?
I think that's what's happening right now. It's a very delicate situation because Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, they've got the blackmail goods on everybody. If Hillary gets set off, she could end a lot of careers. She could end the entire government. And so the goal is to convince her to accept her loss graciously and slowly get her used to that idea. Now, again, my perception is the anti-Trump protests are starting to shrink and fizzle. This talk about flipping the Electoral College, right now it's focusing on just two treasonous GOP electors who are saying, well, we're going to vote not for Hillary Clinton, but for another responsible, qualified Republican. And I did go over to the Constitution, and I did read the qualifications to be president. You have to be born in this country, you have to have lived here 14 years, and you have to be 35 years or older. According to the Constitution, Donald Trump is qualified. And let's not forget Ronald Reagan. And yes, Ronald Reagan was governor of California before he became president, but that was it. And look at Jimmy Carter. Didn't exactly have a career lifetime in politics either before he became president.
No, that was a reactionary election again.
And so is this one.
Yeah.
And so is this one.
Yeah. I am hoping that Hillary Clinton will see the light of day and decide to very calmly accept the results of the election. But, Mike, I'm not sure. And what scares me are the actions of her supporters right now. Yeah,
they're really out there in thug land, and you know, I do wish Dorothy would throw a pail of water onto Hillary Clinton, but last I looked, Hillary's campaign office was ordering the Scotch Guard by the case. So, I don't know.
Yeah. So, what do you think will happen to the Hillary supporters if Trump actually gets in and comfortably takes the oath of office? What happens to these people?
Well, they're going to whine and cry, and they're going to try and mount a propaganda campaign to demonize him, but I don't think they're going to get much traction because, again, the corporate media, in supporting Hillary in such an openly biased way, has damaged their own credibility. I think 2017 is going to be the year of the rise of the independent media. And the independent media is independent because, you know, we're not bought and paid for to a particular point of view. And again, Donald Trump was certainly preferable to Hillary Clinton. Godzilla was preferable to Hillary Clinton this last election. But Donald Trump has a lot of promises to keep. And one of his big promises is that Hillary and her people are going to be brought to justice. And if Trump fails to do that, he's going to turn out to be a one-term president. Yeah, absolutely. How do you think he's going to deal with all the financial challenges he's going to find he's facing? I think he may go, well, it all depends on who his Secretary of Treasury turns out to be, but he almost has no other alternative than to do a Roosevelt approach of just massive inflation, but instead of pouring it on Wall Street, pour it on the people. And that's the only thing that's going to get things going again. We have to rebuild our factories, agriculture. Got to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. And Claire, you had a couple of thoughts you wanted to share with our listeners.
Yes, I did. I think this issue of being defined by how the media wants to define you is the mainstream, or the old mainstream, is something that we have to fight against. We have to define who we are and what we think.
Absolutely, no question about that.
That is one of the most important things that this electoral upset, I think, has demonstrated. And that means when you're checking information, check it from a couple of sources and see where that information aligns. And don't let anyone tell you that something is true. Please go out, look for it on your own. Have the courage to develop that sense of analysis. And you are all now, all of our readers and listeners are part of the independent media. So that gives you the right and the permission and the responsibility. There's a word for it in Hawaiian. It's called kuleana. And it means you have the responsibility of checking out this stuff for yourself and validating that the information you have is real and that it makes sense to you.
And it's even more important now because with this declared war by the corporate media and governments on the independent media, on the Internet as a whole.
Like us. Yes.
They're going to be looking to deliberately trip us up, make us look silly, plant stories with us that are nonsense, if possible, lure us into taking a step for which they could sue somebody out of existence, make an example of them. When they say they're declaring war, they really do mean it. And so we all have to be careful. We have to be more professional than the corporate media in how we handle our stories. Corroboration, multiple sources,
yes.
Don't go with a single rumor.
No.
And I got to tell you, anytime my email box fills up with 12 copies of, oh, you must post this,
nope,
leading to a bunch of nonsense, I know somebody's trying to just set us up. And we just need to be careful because the other side loves to play dirty. They think it's their divine right. And that's how we got into this mess.
Yeah.
Anything else here for our listeners?
I think that's it. I just want to wish everyone a very peaceful and a very happy weekend. And also, pre-Turkey Day, that you get your errands done quickly and you can spend time and good quality time with people you care about over this next week.
And on Monday, I'll be sharing my top secret recipe for turkey stuffing with all of you. Claire already knows what it is.
Yes, I do.
And so, again, a reminder that we're going to be live here on RBN for 3 days next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Thursday and Friday, our overworked and underpaid control room staff are getting the day off, and so too are Claire and I. And we're going to be everybody's getting together with family in person or on Skype, and it'll be a lot of fun. So we're coming up here on the top. The music should be starting here any moment. Have yourself a really good weekend. We're going to be back here Monday on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So have a good weekend, and aloha, America.
Aloha.